Link TV, connecting you to the world. Link TV is viewer supported. Watch more at linktv.org.
Today on Earth Focus, filmmakers look at water. In Beyond the Brink, Jim Thebaut explores the links between water scarcity and security. Hedrick Smith looks at the health impact of toxic chemicals in poisoned waters. And Laura Seltzer profiles the changing life of the watermen of the Chesapeake Bay in The Last Boat Out. All coming up on Earth Focus. Water is sacred and venerated. We are born and reborn in water. Water washes away impurities, heals, and is thought by some to restore youth and provide a link to eternal life. Water flows through us and around us. It nurtures civilizations and enables nature's bounty to grow. Water is life, but today it's threatened. We're running out of water because of growing demand. As more people need water for food, industry, and daily consumption, there is less to go around, and we are polluting much of what is left. How will this affect us? The film Running Dry calls attention to the problem. Here's a look.
There is no greater issue confronting the world than the water scarcity and quality crisis. Every day, 14,000 people die because of a lack of water or from disease caused by water pollution, and 9,500 of these are children. We are living on 1% of the world's water, and most of that is used for agriculture. The other 99% of the world's water is too salty to drink or composed of icebergs and snow. Water is a very precious resource, and a quarter of the world's population urgently needs clean water.
Running Dry is a film produced by Jim Thebaut, president of the Chronicles Group, an organization that educates the public about issues that affect our planet's survival. The availability of water is at the top of the list. Can water shortages lead to conflict? Thebaut's newest film, Beyond the Brink, explores the link between water and international security. Here is a look.
In many regions throughout the world, basic humanitarian needs are largely ignored. These areas often have the least flexible systems to accommodate change, so that drought and extreme weather events will exacerbate the drastic conditions and further threaten international security.
Water is a focus of difficulties across the planet. The first time I visited Israel was 1993. And I said at the time, they're not going to solve their problems in the Middle East until they solve the water problems.
The reality of decreasing water quality, rampant overuse, and poor infrastructures allow for very little flexibility in dealing with drought or other stresses, and is impeding development and threatening social, political stability and cohesion. There are currently 6.8 billion people populating the planet. 1 in 8 do not have access to safe water, and 40% of the world's population do not have access to sanitation. Over 1 million children die every year as a result of diseases caused by unclean water and sanitation. As the number of people increase, so will the stress on these water and sanitation systems. The population of the planet is projected to be 8.5 to 9.2 billion people by 2050. Drought and water scarcity, pollution, loss of agricultural land, depletion of wild fish populations will result in an environment which will not supply enough food to sustain the population of 2050.
Jim Thebaut speaks with Earth Focus correspondent Miles Benson about his film and why we should take notice.
Right now, we're evolving into a very, very dangerous period in the history of the world. My current project looks at the issues of climate change, drought, food, water scarcity, its impact on agriculture, energy, public health, food supply, and its ultimate effect on international security.
Right now, I think there are parts of the globe where you can say, hey, this doesn't appear to be that big of an issue. In other parts, it's a huge issue already. And as the 21st century plays out, this will be one of the defining issues of the century.
I filmed in Australia, and a lot of the similar problems we have in the American Southwest are dramatically presented in Australia, where major fires because of the dryness, lack of water. In February of 2009, they call it Black Saturday. The temperatures were well over 130 degrees Fahrenheit, winds of 70 miles an hour, and they had a major fire, and about 170 people were killed. Many, many were injured. Lakes, streams are drying up. The agriculture community has been hit really hard.
I think we're entering into a really interesting period where we've got soils which have been eroded or acidified. We've got watercourses which have been degraded and reduced flows to start with. So we're entering into a period where we have to produce a lot more with a lot less impact, and that's going to seriously challenge our abilities. And that sort of change is going to impact strongly on people's livelihoods, on their quality of life.
We're not going to have more water. We're facing the challenge of having less. We've got large users of water, particularly in the farming communities, that are facing a myriad of problems ranging from shortage of water, environmental conditions, where we've got deteriorating environments, challenging commodity price world food markets, and all of us, whether it's in Australia or America, we've probably all got to face that and look at ways of changing.
Farmers, third and fourth, fifth generation farmers have lost there's not enough water to be able to sustain the agriculture community. Psychologically, many suicides, 1,000 farmers a year commit suicide in Australia, third and fourth gen, because they've lost their land, had lost their farms because of a lack of water. We're also generating that kind of those problems in, like for example, the San Joaquin Valley in California, where there's drought and water scarcity. California supplies 1/3 of the food to the entire country, and we start losing our agricultural lands in California because of lack of water and drought and so forth. That's a major problem, food security and national security. We need to come to grips with these realities now. We need to have plans to start dealing with these issues. I mean, because it's really serious.
If we don't solve this problem, do you see a future of conflict between nations over water?
No question about it. Mikhail Gorbachev said in my original documentary, Running Dry, no nation leader would hesitate to go to war, potentially, if his country is running out of water. And when you can't feed your population sufficiently, and you know that there is other ways that you can get that food, and there's a real potential for escalation of weapons of mass destruction.
Can you point your finger at the most likely flashpoints around the globe?
Pakistan and India. I mean, here's you got two countries who have weapons of mass destruction, and they've been in conflict with each other for forever. And I think this is a real issue. That's why there's so much focus right now on Pakistan, is because of the potential dangers associated with that part of the world. There's also concern about materials getting in the hands of terrorists and so forth. So there's always that particular issue. But I mean, I think that Middle East could be a flashpoint. We have to start looking at ways of circumventing that. We have to start bringing people together. One of the messages that I feel is really important is that instead of looking at how water may separate us, is how we can bring people together. I think that water can be a bridge to peace.
How do we persuade political leaders that this is a now issue for them?
That's a real hard question to answer, because usually the fox has to be in the henhouse before anybody takes action in our country. And we need leadership that begins to understand these things. I mean, there's got to be members of Congress who have the vision. And if the people don't have that vision, then they should be replaced by people who do. We have to get serious people in these positions of our elected officials.
What other approaches are we going to have to take?
We have to value the price of water. We have to value what it is. The public and private utilities in our country have done such a great job in delivering a wonderful, wonderful water at a very low price, and so we don't even think about it. We have to change that. And if suddenly, out of the blue, you get a utility bill of $500, it's going to sober you up a little bit when you start thinking about how you're misusing that resource.
Jim, you've got a project in the works next in South Africa. What's that about?
Running Dry South Africa we now have a cooperation and establish a partnership with the country of South Africa, and we're going to implement a major educational project throughout the entire country, in every squatter camp, in every township throughout all of South Africa, to educate the citizens, empower them so they may become proactive in their own communities and be able to start dealing with issues of water and sanitation. South Africa, I think, can be a model for how other countries can implement, what they can do. And so that's where we're kind of looking at it as Running Dry South Africa is bigger than South Africa. It is really going to, once we implement that project, it will be a model for other countries in the world.
Jim Thebaut, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Six-legged frogs and chicken waste in our waters are part of Hedrick Smith's new documentary film, Poison Waters. Smith takes a look at toxic chemicals in the water around us, chemicals like endocrine disruptors, which interfere with natural hormones in the body.
When you see scientists like Vicki Blazer cutting open fish, finding intersex in the male fish, seeing high levels of fish kills, seeing immune systems disrupted, seeing other damage to the fish, is that a warning to you potentially about human health?
Oh, absolutely. The warning not just from the smallmouth bass in the Potomac, but from amphibians all across the country. You have frogs with 6 legs, hermaphroditic frogs, male frogs with ovaries, female frogs with male genitalia. These are the canaries, the modern canary in the mine, that we haven't been paying enough attention to.
So many new chemicals have emerged lately that scientists and regulators are playing catch-up to industry, trying to spot which chemicals they think pose new dangers in our water. Are we facing a long-term slow-motion risk that we don't recognize because it's not readily apparent?
We are. There are 5 million people being exposed to endocrine disruptors just in the mid-Atlantic region, and yet we don't know precisely how many of them are going to develop premature breast cancer, are going to have problems with reproduction, going to have all kinds of congenital anomalies of the male genitalia, things that are happening. We know they're happening, but they're happening at a broad, low level so that they don't raise the alarm in the general public.
Do you know what the safe levels are?
In most cases, we don't know what the safe levels are, and some of the new science is suggesting that levels that we used to think were safe may in fact not be safe.
For humans?
For humans. So we're finding in certain cases that much lower levels than we previously thought were a problem may in fact have the potential to harm at least some segment of the population.
Hedrick Smith is one of America's most distinguished journalists and authors. He is a Pulitzer Prize-winning former reporter and editor for the New York Times, and Emmy Award-winning producer and correspondent for the PBS show Frontline. He shares his thoughts on America's toxic waters with Earth Focus correspondent Miles Benson.
Hedrick Smith, you've made a powerful film, Poisoned Water. Didn't we create an agency of the federal government to put a stop to that problem maybe 30 years ago? What happened?
We made a lot of progress. EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, did a lot of good things. They focused on industrial pollution. They went after the Cuyahoga River, which was bursting into flames, the LA smog, the algae in the Potomac River. And then it kind of got off our radar screen. And what happened was voluntarism began to replace enforcement. New chemicals came along, population continued to grow, new kinds of pollution came along, and we've gotten way behind the curve. Science isn't up with industry, the regulators aren't up with the danger, and most of us in the public, myself included when I started the reporting here, have no idea how serious the dangers are. To us, to our kids, as well as to the fish and the whales and wildlife.
Why did you make this film?
I'm a water guy. I love the water. I sail, I swim, I hike on the water, I crab. I'm not a very good fisherman, but water is important to me for fun, and I also am aware that it's important to me to live on. I was curious about what happened. I heard bad things were going on. I really didn't know, and it came as a terrible shock to me. At the end of reporting this film, I'm not sure I understand how our great-grandchildren are going to live on the face of the earth unless we change the way we're living.
Who are the bad guys?
Everybody. We're all the bad guys. That's one of the hardest things to learn. The kinds of things we use to pesticides and herbicides in our yards, the cleaning agents we use in our homes, some of the metals in the toothpaste we put in our mouth, some of the chemicals in the shampoo we put on our hair, the suntan lotion and other stuff we put on our faces to protect ourselves from the sun. Many of those products have things in them called endocrine disruptors. That is, they disrupt the normal functioning of the body, the fish body, the alligator body, the frog body, and the human body. And if they build up, scientists are now telling us, what we're seeing is evidence of higher rates of breast cancer among women, lower sperm count, lower reproduction among men, more congenital defects among babies. So it's a very serious connection that has been made in recent years. There are 80,000 industrial chemicals in use. The original laws and regulations setting up the EPA regulated only about 4,000 or 5,000 of them.
Is anybody in the world doing a better job of trying to control this problem than we are?
I think there's some evidence that the Europeans do a better job. The Europeans have a system by which if scientists raise a question about a new chemical that's going into a product and that's getting into the environment, they raise a red flag and the regulators say to the company that's produced the product, you can't put that on the market until you prove it's safe. In America, the company can put the product on the market and it's up to the scientists to prove it's dangerous. Now, there's more of a preventative, proactive, prophylactic, if you will, approach in Europe, and there probably are better results there. Overall, the kinds of problems we're seeing in the waters of Chesapeake Bay or Potomac River or the Puget Sound or the Mississippi River are reflected in river systems around the world, in the Gulf of Finland, in the Gulf of Siam, and the Gulf of Aden. You know, you're going to see those same kinds of things, particularly when you have heavy concentrations of people, industry, economic activity, and agriculture as well.
Rick Smith, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
I used to make money, but not no more.
I got bills to pay and children who need clothes.
When you get done paying it, everybody else, you ain't got nothing.
I know there's fish out there, but where God only knows.
Water quality is going to be everybody's job.
They say these waters are in what they used to be. But I got people back online who count on me.
Whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and it has.
The work is backbreaking. The bounty of the sea is disappearing, but still they set out each morning, determined to keep a fading dream alive, passed down through the generations to live the life of a waterman.
And I still have my hands on the wheel.
Something needs to be done to clean up the bay.
But if something's not done, the waterman's going to die, and the knowledge that he has is going to die with him.
Laura Seltzer has been producing, writing, and directing award-winning social action videos since 1993. Her latest film, The Last Boat Out, is part of Voices of the Chesapeake, a series of 3 films profiling how Virginia families are trying to preserve their way of life in the face of relentless development and the declining health of the Chesapeake Bay. She shares her insights with Miles Benson.
The Last Boat Out is about a family of watermen who are tirelessly trying to preserve their way of life of working the waters on the Chesapeake Bay in my hometown of Newport News, Virginia. And I decided to tell a very personal story about the Bay because I wanted to shed light on how the Bay is affecting a community of people in my hometown.
Bubba and Jim Withrow, brothers and partners. 6 days a week, they take their boat, the Taylor Ray, into the bay to search for the day's catch. They come from a long line of hard-working watermen on the Chesapeake Bay. Today, they're working with their father, Harvey.
We left the dock about 5. We went out there to take up 100 pots so I could take them home to clean them and dip them, get them ready to go back over by the end of the week.
On a good day, they gather 50 bushels of crabs before sunrise. Today, there were only a few crabs in each pot.
We took up about 3 bushels of crabs, which ain't very good. Usually, we double, triple that at least.
About $100 worth. Made nothing. That's how it would be the rest of the week, basically.
Despite diminishing harvests, Bubba and Jim are determined to stay loyal to their family trade.
So I've done this all my life. Since I've graduated, that's 20 years, so pretty hard to walk away from it.
Many watermen are leaving the water to work land jobs. Bubba's been offered a construction job. If he takes it, he fears he'll be leaving the water for good.
Bubba, you're a fool not to take it. Well, you ain't got where they take taxes out of you and all that in retirement. Shucks.
You work for someone, you don't know what you're going to do, whatever he tells you.
He said make about, what, 45? And you're lucky to make 15 or 20 in here. That's a big difference, ain't it?
Freedom.
Oysters, clams, crabs.
Oysters, clams, and crabs are the main industry. Eels, rockfish.
So these are folks who have made their living, their way of life on the water, harvesting the bounty of nature. What's happening to it?
Well, they've been making their living off of harvesting the bay for 4 or 5 generations, a lot of these guys. And because of the pollutants coming into the bay, there just aren't as many fish to be had. There are a lot more rules and regulations that are imposed on these guys, rightfully so, because we need to clean up the bay.
But they're not doing the polluting.
The Chesapeake Bay is the largest estuary in the United States. And then you've got 64,000 square miles that is the Bay watershed that starts up in New York, upstate New York, comes all the way down to the southern tip of Virginia. So there are so many things that affect our waters, this body of water. We've got wastewater treatment runoff, we've got agriculture, we've got industry, growth in industry from our cars. There's nitrogen and phosphorus that just comes into the water that it's very, very hard. All washed into the bay. It's all washed into the bay, 64,000 square miles.
How many people are actually employed in your old hometown in the way they want to be employed?
There's under 2,000 working watermen in the entire state of Virginia. And that is about only a third of what it was in the 1970s. I think there were over 8,000 plying their trade in 1975.
Is this way of life doomed? Is it gone forever? Is it vanishing and it's not going to come back, or is there any hope for them for the future?
There's going to become a new type of waterman in the future. Watermen who might not be the hunters and gatherers as much as the farmers on the bay, which you'll see in the film. In some of the aerials I shot, you can see the oyster farms.
How do the oyster farms work?
One of the gentlemen in my film, Dudley Biddlecombe, he's a long-time waterman. He talks to us about how he cultivates these oyster farms in the middle of an estuary off the bay, and he sets them up in these big metal tin type things, and he plants these what's called spat-on shells, so they're baby oysters on the oyster shells. And it can take 2 or 3 years for an oyster to really come to its fruition.
That's my oyster farm.
Waterman Dudley Biddlecombe is an aquaculture advocate.
There's a line that runs that way, one runs that way, and there are rows of these cages along that line. I don't say you're going to make a living at it, but it'll take up some of the slack from a slack crab season or whatever kind of other fishery you might have. That's the main idea on this whole project, is to kind of revive our oyster planting business.
In recent years, oyster farms have begun to flourish along the bay's shorelines.
One adult oyster can filter up to 50 gallons of water per day. In addition to that, conglomeration of oysters is providing lots of habitat for other organisms in the bay, and all those oysters are also spawning and producing many, many more oysters.
It looks like about 10 or 15 oysters landed on that one shell. So there's an oyster, 2, 3.
Oysters filter out algae out of the water, and we have an excessive amount of algae because of excessive nitrogen and phosphorus, which are the primary pollutants in the Chesapeake Bay.
You're optimistic in the long term about the future of the bay. You think it can come back?
I think that the Chesapeake Bay can come back if we all take action. We all own up to everything that we do can make a difference, for the positive or for the negative. So you have to decide.
Laura Seltzer, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world. To learn more, visit linktv.org.